This chapter in the book starts by saying that when we seek to understand a person's motivation, we are essentially asking why. So sometimes when I watch movies or read about people climbing mountains, I often have to ask why. Is it because someone paid them to? Or did they feel this immense drive to reach this accomplishment? Or was it simply because they wanted a better look at the area around them? So, getting a better understanding of our students' motivation and recognizing what we can do as educators will help create that positive, welcoming, and inclusive learning environment. The specific objectives for this video are that by the end, you will be able to discuss students' common motivators and demotivators to learn. And you might recognize some of your own in that list. You will be able to describe theories of motivation as they relate to college teaching and evaluate strategies of enhancing student motivation, specifically to identify those most relevant to you. So I want you to reflect on what really motivated you as an undergraduate in college. And that might look different than a graduate student. So why did you go to college? What was your why? What was it that kept you going when you hit rough spots? Was it thinking about the pride your family would have? Was it thinking about the career that you were, pursuing and wanted to have someday? Was it other factors? And then think about what that might be for your students today. I think some of those motivations are likely still the same, but there might be other factors that they're considering. And so getting to know your students, as we've already discussed, will help you identify what that why is for them. In the book, and again, I've cited the source, that this study said that motivation is based on these three components. So activation, persistence, and intensity. So activation is basically deciding to get started. You've decided that you're going to read a chapter out of the book, or that you're going to train to climb a mountain. Whereas persistence, as you can imagine, is actually putting in the effort. So it's setting aside a certain amount of time to study for a course, or to review your materials, or to train for that mountain climb. And the last one is intensity, and that's how much energy you're going to devote to it. So are you going to, limit your distractions? Are you going to get a trainer, go to tutoring, and so on? So these three factors work together to influence how motivated or demotivated someone may be. I wager that you've heard of these terms, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. As college instructors, we hope our students are intrinsically motivated, but they may not all be, and they may not all be at the same time. But the idea of intrinsic motivation is that it's a natural part and it comes from within. So we might describe that as curiosity or learning just for the sake of learning. And this will result in behaviors in absence of external reinforcements. So if you sit down to read a cookbook and try a new recipe just because you want to, that would be more of an intrinsic motivation. Whereas extrinsic might be that somebody needs you to fix dinner and they've asked you to cook that recipe. But these are things that are coming from outside a system. So they encourage an action independent of any inherent interest. Grades can serve as an extrinsic motivation. Expectations of significant others, and this means people you care about, your parents, your friends, and so on. It could also be financial incentives, such as working on this might improve your grade to get a scholarship, or you might have a higher salary in a certain position someday. So these are examples of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Now let's consider what motivates students to learn. So what is it that you think would motivate a student to learn, or what motivates you to learn? Well, the book highlights a few things. One is the instructor. And isn't that great that as teachers we can have an influence on this by approaching the subject matter enthusiastically and sharing that with students? It can also be in how we design the course. If it's clear and understandable, that makes it easier for students to learn, so they're more motivated. Definitely drawing upon a student's prior interest in the materials is beneficial, and helping them see the relevance of the course content. So yes, you may have to explain why you're teaching this and why it's important, but that will help motivate them. They also recognize that the appropriateness of performance measures. So that doesn't say easy tests or easy assignments, but what it says is that what you're choosing to assess them on makes sense. They're more motivated then to learn. Now, on the other side of the coin, the demotivators, as you can imagine, if you have an instructor who's negative and has negative behaviors, that's going to negatively impact students' motivation to learn. If the course is disorganized or you are not supporting a positive learning environment, that could also be a demotivator. The boring or irrelevant course content, and again, there's some things that our students need to know that they may at first think is boring, but helping them see the importance of that helps motivate them to learn it. I teach a lot of grammar, spelling, and punctuation rules, so I know exactly what this means. There's also students' prior disinterest in the material. So if they had taken a course similar to this and didn't enjoy it, that might be a demotivator for the next one. All right, so let's dive into some theories of motivation. And I'm going to talk through these fairly quickly. There's more details in the textbook. One thing that I've added for each of these theories is I wanted to highlight a potential study you could propose through the lens of the scholarship of teaching and learning that would allow you to test that theory or apply that theory. So let's just start with reinforcement theory. This is something you may have heard about if you've taken any educational theory course. Skinner really emphasizes the idea that behavior is shaped by consequences. And we've talked a little bit about behaviorism. So this idea that positive reinforcement encourages repetition, but negative reinforcement or punishment discourages it. So if you get rewarded for trying hard and doing well in a course, you're going to continue to do that. If you feel like you're not being reinforced and all the feedback you get is negative or doesn't help you grow, then you're going to be less motivated to continue to pursue that. So an example of this is you could test whether providing immediate feedback and small participation rewards, like bonus points, increases student engagement in online courses. So that's one way we could look at this theory through a study of the scholarship of teaching and learning. The next is goal setting theory. I bet everyone has had an opportunity to set goals at one point in their life. And these authors say that clear, challenging, and attainable goals help motivation and performance. When I taught a freshman orientation class, I would do a goal setting day, and we would talk about goals, short-term, mid-term, long-term goals, and help students see how they can be working toward those. So a study of this is we could examine whether students who set specific learning goals for a course, and you can see an example here, will demonstrate stronger performance than those without those explicit goals. So there'd be a way that you could design this and just look at the role of identifying clearly goals they have for the semester. The next one is somewhat similar, this idea of goal orientation theory. This really has to do with what types of goals they're setting. This says that students approach learning with different orientations. So are they trying to master the subject, meaning they're going to focus on learning, or are they focused more on performance goals? And the chapter in the book, again, gives some examples of this. But I think about this for people who are trying to learn a new skill, like trying to learn piano. Well, if you're trying to only focus on the performance goal, it might be hard at the beginning. But if you focus on the mastery goal or the learning goal, as the book calls it, you might actually achieve this over time. So this is an example of a type of study you could organize, create to test this theory. The next one is expectancy theory. So this has to do with the belief that effort leads to performance, and performance leads to outcomes, and those outcomes are valued. So the subtle example here is that we could investigate how linking course activities to career relevant skills affects students' motivation. And I think we see this a lot in college, where we want them to see that what they're doing in class matters in the real world and that they need to learn these skills. Self-determination theory has to do with autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And when those factors are high, motivation is high. So you can see an example here. It really draws upon this idea that if you give students a choice in different areas, that might increase their motivation. Attribution theory is that students interpret their successes and failures based on, a number of reasons: effort, ability, or they were just lucky. And those attributions influence future motivation. So we see this also in younger students, where if we reward only the outcome, like, oh, you got a good grade, but we don't recognize you studied so hard, you worked so hard, I saw you, rewriting your paper. It may, harm them when the outcome wasn't as positive. So this is about reshaping the feedback you provide to students and how that might influence their persistence. Finally, social belonging is something I'm intrigued with, about how a student's sense of belonging can influence their motivation, persistence, and achievement. This goes to a broader idea of student success in college. And so this subtle example is recognizing that, helping students build that community in your class may influence their sense of belonging and retention. So those theories of motivation are really informative, and I hope you can see how we could then test those and create scenarios that draw upon those to create a better learning environment for our students. So as you reflect on your own teaching philosophy, I want you to consider what theory best aligns with your approach to motivating students. And maybe you use a variety of these as you go through your teaching career. So the discussion post, the second one for this week, is to review the list of 50 strategies the book provides on these pages. They have them broken into 4 categories. So for each of those categories, I want you to reflect and consider which ones would be easy for you to implement, or which ones are you already doing. And then are there 2 that would require more effort, or you're not sure how you would be able to achieve them? So for each category, you'll identify 4 things. So you'll have 16 total, if I did my math right. So let me wrap up by saying that many factors influence a student's motivation. Some of them are things within your control, and some of them aren't. We can lean on some theories of motivation to help identify those common factors that are influencing students' motivation. And as teachers, there are things we can do to implement strategies that will help students, and that could be related to our persona, the course's subject matter, the teaching approach, and assessments.